Right, delighted to be here, and I'm very aware that we sit in between the Chancellor coming to speak to you later, so we hope it's interesting and exciting, and I think a lot of what we're going to say today actually pulls together a lot of what we've covered over the past couple of days. So briefly, Ben Matthews, partner at Baringa Partners. I don't have to do much more on the introduction. I've got a fantastic panel joining me today. We've got Yeming Wang from Alibaba Cloud EMEA, Frank, CEO of Yolt. We've got Simon Miller from Scalable Capital, Anna Tsyupko, CEO of Paybase, and also we've got Franziska from NDGIT. So without further ado, a little bit of framing around what we're actually going to be talking about today, and then I'll get on to the panel session. Now, what we propose to do, we're going to keep it quite interactive, we hope. We had a great conversation in the green room, so if we can bring any of that to bear on the panel, we'll be in a really good place, and I think you'll have an interesting session. Right, the context in which we're sitting here today is a huge shift in macroeconomic challenges, different challenges within the market. These range from the new API economy, as it's called, the challenges of open banking in the UK market, and all this in the macroeconomic context of climate change, decarbonisation, and also the focus on talent. This coupled also with the added challenges around vulnerable customers, social inclusion, and financial inclusion, which certainly at Baringa we see as an incredibly hot topic at the moment. So all these things are coming into play at once. They naturally have an impact on some of the solutions we see our banking partners are working on, and also what the fintechs are interested in. So there's a lot of different dynamics at play that have a real bearing on business cases and also the focus over the next, say, 5 to 10 years. Briefly, before we get on to the panel conversation, I wanted to ask a quick question. So I'm going to use a fairly analog biological process for testing the understanding in the room. It's going to be a show of hands. So first of all, who has heard of the API economy? Right, that's not bad actually. We've got the right people in the room. That's good. Second question, who actually understands the value you can get from the API economy? Yeah, slightly smaller show of hands. So that sort of tees up, I think, the challenge nicely for what we're going to cover today. Anna, given Paybase's proposition and your central role working with partners, does the consumer really care about the API economy? Can you share some of your experiences?
We work with clients who are marketplaces, gig economy platforms. We white label our solution to them. And so when their end customers, be it merchants or consumers, want to give access to their Paybase accounts to a TPP, they will often not even know that it's a Paybase account sitting in the background unless they've really read the T's and C's. And so that's a really, really interesting challenge that we need to overcome that hasn't really been thought about because, you know, when the regulation was drafted, it was very much drafted with banks in mind that are the consumer-facing entity. So we've got that interesting dynamic going on here, and we are actively working on a solution that will hopefully provide best-of-class user experience throughout this difficulty. But the other thing is, our payment services accounts are very much transient accounts, and so often giving access to TPPs doesn't even make sense. There isn't really a use case. So again, an instance where regulation has maybe not been as nuanced as we would have liked. Now, the way we want to approach this is by actually actively seeking out TPP partnerships with, for instance, accounting software providers that can actually add real value to our clients. But it's a lot more challenging just because it is an edge case that hasn't been considered, and where we're kind of left to our own devices in trying to make the best of it and turn it into something that will benefit our clients.
Turn this also to Frank. I mean, Frank and I were discussing earlier. I mean, given Yolt's significant impact on the API economy already, what do you see as the biggest challenges that face you at the moment, at least?
Yeah, I think an API is a means to an end. It's not a goal in life to create APIs. Of course, for us as Yolt, being a part of the open banking ecosystem, we always had to focus on the APIs will be there to get access to the accounts. But there it really starts. The starting point is to get access to the banks or to other providers to start working with the data to provide additional value. And I think the greatest challenge in there, I think, yes, API, everybody knows it, but how do you kind of effectively expose it in such a way that it's easy to connect, that it's reliable, and looking to the context of Yolt, over the past 15 months of working intensively with banks here in the UK, but also in other banks in Europe on the open banking, it's a process to get it right and to get it stable and to get the data flowing to TPPs, but also to banks themselves, to build a new differentiating customer experience on top of that. So access, stability, and making sure that you can use it on a day-to-day business to drive new value for customers.
Yeah, sure. And thinking again about the conversation we've had, Simon, from a scalable capital perspective, open banking is yet to really impact, I guess, your area of interest at the moment. Can you talk that through and again share some of your perspectives?
Yeah, I like Frank's perspective there, about it's not just focusing on the API, it's about the result. And yeah, so Scalable Capital, we're a D2C, we started out as a direct-to-consumer robo-advisor. So we're nowhere near yet open banking, but in our experience so far, after a couple of years, we started to partner with businesses, so we went down the B2B avenue. And for that, we realized obviously that the APIs we built ourselves to connect with different components of what we provide. So to give an example, we'll have a component which will provide payments for clients, we'll have a component which will do their KYC, things like that. For those components, you have to connect to the partner in each way. And in each instance, we'd have to design, specify the APIs, put them into place. And that was how you'd provide a seamless experience for a client. The client can go in without putting any personal details in, without providing their bank details, and they can sign up to our service. That was great. If we now want to go to the next level and partner with multiple providers, we have to go through the whole process again. And that's a pretty burdensome kind of series of events to go through. And that means we're not focusing on the innovation, the product, the actual service, which is the client, which we just said is what we want to do. So we kind of sit here in this, we're not quite in the open banking space yet, in wealth management, but we look at it almost as like the shining light. Like we're really hoping that there'll be this standardized set of APIs which will come in for payments, for other elements of the service, which will allow us to focus on clients, innovation, and less on infrastructure and implementation with partners.
Makes sense. And thinking about your experience, Franziska, in NDGIT, again, we spoke before about you see the open banking challenges firsthand. Can you talk through again some of your experiences in open banking?
Of course, so yeah, totally agree also what Simon said, like there are a lot of things to be done at banks. So basically NDGIT is always placed as the middle layer and connection part about between banks and fintechs. So we're a little bit confronted to both problems. But I think one important thing is that we first look on the definition and also the understanding of the term open banking also in the bank experience. Right. So basically a lot of banks just see open banking as establishing open APIs and open up their data to TPP so they can simply access and use the data. But for us at NDGIT, it's more, open banking is much more a platform-driven business approach where you say you create an ecosystem where TPPs can use your data and in return you can use services these fintechs provide to your end clients. And one good example could be that, for example, Scalable can later be integrated in an application or in an app form in the e-banking system of banks or also other applications like PFM systems or wealth management systems or applications. And if you enhance this service in your e-banking with like single sign-on and value-added services for your clients, you do not have to create everything by yourself as a bank, but you can just reuse services already being in the market. And we've also seen this in a lot of banks happening, that there's a lot of change in their mindset, so they want to implement it, but they face a lot of challenges based on yeah, it's the existing legacy systems that are quite old, also complex bureaucratic processes. So I think banks really need to get more flexible, establish flexible middle layers, like for example platforms, API platforms that can enable those digital processes and also speed up in terms of thinking and really implementing things.
Can I ask, like, what hoops, and for the people with kind of open banking experience, what hoops do the banks or does the industry need to go through to get to that process? Like, is it a and by to get to, I mean to get to the stage where the end clients are really seeing the open banking benefits? Is that a multi-year thing, or to anyone really?
Well, I think
That's a good question.
Sorry.
Please, I don't have to answer it.
Did I steal your question as well?
I think it depends a little bit. So I think there's already open banking services in the markets, also without regulation. So I think PSD2, for example, and open banking in general will happen slowly. And I think even like the bigger banks probably will take more time to implement these services, but we can already see a lot of challenger banks, also innovative banks that already establish open banking services. Like, for example, we had one case where we established the first open banking in Switzerland, and there's no regulation. They don't fall under PSD2. And now we get a lot of requests from other Swiss banks that ask us, hey, can we do the same with your platform? So I think it's already coming.
Yeah, and we were talking earlier about the different challenges in different markets and different ideas as to what open banking can bring on an international basis, in addition to what we're doing here in the UK. And briefly, before I introduce Yeming a bit more, because we really want to hear your experience from China specifically and with Alibaba Cloud Solution. One thing we absolutely did pick up on was the number of TPPs, given the amount of access to the UK market. We would have liked to have seen more, but also you want to see them compete on an even or level playing field. So you're not necessarily seeing the commercial opportunities you may have hoped, although we recognise it's still early days for the regulation, but that's a real focus area and something we're all watching closely and want to succeed. But think about the topic, which is around global infrastructures. We had a great conversation about Alibaba Cloud and what's happening in China. I'd love to hear a bit more about the open banking equivalent in China and also what you're seeing here in Europe.
Sure. So Alibaba, in China, we are running Ant Financial. So this is one of the pillars of Alibaba business. So today, let's say I'm from Alibaba Cloud. So Cloud, we are supporting all the other functions of the whole group. So there are functions about retail, there are functions about lifestyle, there are functions about finance and logistics. So in our position, finance is one pillar of all the business scenario, right? So if we talk about finance, so today Alibaba, we have more than 800 million of active users. So actually, I think, even we don't name it as open banking, but actually the approach is real API-based platforms. So the idea is, within this ecosystem, or today, let's say, an ecosystem of open API services, there are a lot of different services, including payment, of course, including insurance, including credit services. Even, the way of working totally changed. I think there are two characters. So the first character is, it's changed the way from take and give and take, traditional banking, right, to today more user-centric. So every individual, they will see their behavior by themselves. And also for the service provider, will have all the necessary data. So it's very much user-centric and data-driven. I think this is first. And second, the way of working completely changed. It's not anymore one consumer with one bank. It's more ecosystem. A lot of service provider, they could think about how to bridge a new business scenario. It's a business scenario-based triggered services. And then it's really ecosystem. Everybody have to find their position in order to create a certain business scenario. So I see this is what, through many years of practice in China, this is what I see the most two significant characters.
I guess the interesting thing always there is also the scale of what's going on in China compared to what we're seeing here in Europe. Anna, you had a question?
Yes, no, I just wanted to kind of add a point about geographic disparity, right? And I think even within Europe, the adoption of open banking or the equivalents will look quite different country by country. And one important aspect to consider here is privacy, right? If you, as a consumer, give access to all of your financial information to one single provider, yes, that will give you more flexibility, it's a better user experience, it aggregates everything for you, but what's the cost you're paying in terms of basically centralizing all of your financial history, all of your financial data with one single provider? Just thinking about, personal experience, I love using my Monzo card, I love getting those notifications, seeing my real-time spend, but then I do ask myself, okay, yes, my traditional bank has got all of that information, but I know they won't use it. They're not in a position to use it. But Monzo are very much in a position to use it and to leverage it. And is that really something that, is that a price that I'm willing to pay? And so thinking about the geographic disparity, I think here in the UK, we're probably more likely to do so. But thinking about Germany or Austria, where data and data protection has always been very, very high on the agenda, and even in the kind of Facebook era, I know that a lot of people created their profiles with fake names or not using their surname. I think we'll see a very, very different type of adoption, just given the sensitivity around privacy.
I was going to say, it's an issue you've seen too. Frank, no, go ahead.
I think it's definitely an important topic. You use the word the cost of giving the data. I think we as innovative companies, I think we mainly have to look at the value that you're creating of it. And I think that's also the way of explaining it. Coming back, we're not selling API. And the research is how many percentage of the people know the words open banking. I think that's not a game. It's about what kind of value that you create. Can you indeed, what you're explaining, that people don't have to replicate their data, that they can save time, that they can save effort, that they can be more on top of their money. And yes, that comes with a very profound explanation of what is happening with the data. But I think the success of open banking will be about, can you provide sustainable value, and it can come in better products, saving time, getting faster out of debt. And I think this is really the opportunity to shape it together. So value, focus, and cost.
Yeah.
It's a balance.
Agreed. Agreed. Just a brief kind of response to that. Absolutely, we should be value and kind of benefit driven, but at the same time, I think it's really important not to forget the other elements and to safeguard as much as possible and to educate as much as possible so that consumers can really make an informed decision.
Yeah.
And do you think open banking has got us to this position, for example, in the UK market? So without open banking, do you think this is something that would have naturally happened, or do you think open banking's been key to that? And then the second part of my question, which is open to the panel, is this something you think will be adopted more fully on certainly a European and global basis?
My personal view is I don't think that necessarily, I think you used the word like people need to be kind of educated, informed about everything. My view is that we're still at this early stage in open banking, or even in API, the API economy, where really we're still looking at the early adopters, right? Like you look at Monzo, you've got 3 million clients, etc. I think the true value for the mass market comes when we are further down the line, where open banking really has an effect, where you can, rather than what we've done so far, which is unbundle the banks and provide lots of different services which people can pick and choose because they're engaged with their finances. They can do it on their smartphone because they like picking up these topics. Instead, you go to the mass market, where actually either through a bank integrating with various different partners, providing their services from one hub, a Yolt providing those services through one hub, or the challengers building them all themselves, you'd get back to having all the services under one app or service provider. And then for the mass market, they don't care about open banking at all. They probably won't ever understand the concept of it. And I certainly don't think that they really need to be fully educated about everything that's going on. But my view is that through open banking, through that connectivity, you'll be able to position what's right for them and do some education along the way, but only in the elements they need, rather than thinking that it's a decision they're always going to have to make. I think that's where we really end up. And I don't know how far down the line that is. That was kind of my question earlier. I want it to be tomorrow, but maybe it's 5-10 years down the line.
May I add something? Yeah. I think, from my personal opinion, I believe that open banking is natural direction of AI or big data. Because it's not only financial area, it's all the industry, right? When 5G, when 4G, 5G, IoT, make it possible to have a data-driven solution for all the industry. It's not only finance. So I think generally the direction must be there. And also, second point is, today is still early stage. So it's still, let's say, I think people have to bear some tolerance. Maybe from the very beginning, it's different structure, but finally it will move to you have to try to bear the failure of the trials, right? And beside of this, I believe what I see in China is open banking or API-based services, not only B2C, right? Today we talk a lot about for each consumer, but actually for B2B side, there are a lot of possibilities because financial services is only one part of the pillar of a traditional business. Just this morning, I gave an example, during our discussion. For example, a logistic company, right? When logistic company, they have a different process from A to B, right? And during this A to B, the core business is logistics. So how finance will be integrated with different process. And from this point of view, maybe you will not see banking. It's hidden, right? But still, the big data or AI or API-based services is embedded, which can improve the efficiency, right? So I think, generally it will be a naming of a general big data or AI. So I think this, only based on this, Alibaba will give another name. Sometimes we say, okay, Alibaba, we are running our FinTech, but also we want to position as TechFin because we want to enable, using this technology, using this capability to enable for other verticals. In this general, point of view, it is an enabler position, more for B2B position.
Yeah, sure. And do you think also, another question to the panel, and think about, Frank, your position with Yolt and the association with ING, has that ability to look at technology in a different way and then fundamentally, I guess, change the organization to make the most of the opportunities you see there? So this is all about a cultural change as much as a technical change. Is that one of the constraints you still see persists in the market with some of the bigger banks?
Yeah, it's innovation and adopting new technology is definitely about culture, but also the ability and setting the agenda that it's a key priority for you. And open banking, I think when it started by the EC, it was, okay, far down the line, we have to open up. Why do we have to open up? And I think now, after being closely working with the banks in the past months, we see that first hurdle of, okay, we have to share the data, that discussion is gone. It's now more about, okay, what can we do together? And I think also our talks with banks are changing, like, okay, there's a Dutch FinTech coming here to get the data. Why are you here? That's now gone. It's more like, how can we shape value? And I think that's great. Looking to the UK, there was also a very strong program management from Imran, from the Open Banking Work Group. Now also being active in France, Italy, and making connections across Europe, I see a bit of the discussion coming back, what happened here 12, 14 months ago. So your second question was, how will Europe follow? And your question, how long do I have to wait to jump? It will take some time to get used to it. I think what is good, why we discuss this topic, that also Europe looks to what happened here and how this next kind of phase in open banking can look like. That is more an opportunity side than more as legislation or a compliance thing on open banking.
Yeah, just to add to that, I guess, the regulation didn't come about for no reason, and in fact, it's rooted in industry practice that it has already been seeing. So screen scraping, we all know, has been around for quite a while, and you can achieve similar things with screen scraping as with being an AIS. So in reality, what regulation does is it gives a better framework to achieving these things that protects the user better, but also allows the companies that want to build on top of APIs to do so in a much, much more seamless way. Again, with PISP, Sofortüberweisung has been around in Germany for years and years on end. So I think regulation isn't really introducing something new. It's just looking at the market and then finding kind of best practice ways of propelling that forward. And I think that's probably the most helpful way of looking at those changes and the regulation in question.
Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just one word to Frank. Completely agree with that banks are like slightly changing their mindsets. So we also had the cases where we had first discussions about implementing PSD2 in banks, and then they shifted a little bit to, okay, can we extend this? Can we use the platform to do something more than only to be compliant? So now we're talking with the same banks that first said, no, we won't do more than just being compliant. We just want to be on the regulatory side. Now talking to them with like establishing ecosystems, what I just said before, or establishing digital processes using APIs and also accessing data from other banks. So I think this is one important thing that we can see on the market, that the mind shift in banks is slightly coming. It's not completely there yet, but we see it happening.
So I feel some positivity there, sort of saying that the regulation is there, we need that as a framework in which to operate. Mm-hmm. But what I heard from what your responses were, some positivity around where this is going, it's just naturally taking perhaps a little longer than we'd all like. So in the interest of time, we're coming to the end of our session. I thought I'd ask a question about innovation and what excites you out in the market at the moment. It could be your own business and capability, of course, but it'd be great to hear some other things that you've seen out there that you find exciting and could be transformational for the FS ecosystem. So, Zangl, what have you seen out there? What innovation have you seen that's got you excited over the past sort of 12 months?
I mean, I'm personally extremely happy to see PIS providers becoming more and more established. We work with a lot of marketplaces that have high value items that they sell, and often card payments aren't feasible due to the cost structure, but they really have to compromise on user experience if they want to accept bank payments where the consumer has to leave the marketplace, log into their online banking, initiate that payment, and then kind of return to complete their purchase. So integrating that functionality, I think, will be really important and exciting for us and our clients.
Simon?
I'm loving the impact that the challenger banks are having. Like, we don't personally currently work with any challenger banks, but their movements, their speed of movement and innovation is forcing the incumbent banks to look at partnering and providing services at a faster speed than they could do themselves. So from a selfish point of view for Scalable, that means banks now will approach you and say, right, well, we need to have a robo-advisor, and we need it to be fully integrated because our clients need to be able to access it without putting any details in, any payment information, all of that stuff. And that kind of excites me because you're starting to see that acceleration again, and where we could really end up in the next few years is these kind of seamless services where clients have to do very little but get great financial services.
Okay. Frank?
In the context of the topic of this discussion about platforms, I think that's exciting to see. Okay, platforms arise, or sometimes you join another platform. I think these kind of collaborations eventually to create a 1 + 1 = 3 for consumers. I think that's very exciting to share data, but also strengthen each other and put the customer at the center.
Yeah. So from my point of view, I see the purpose of using API-based or AI-based solution is to make financing services more inclusive, right? For example, in Alibaba today, we did like service for example, like microloan, right? Microloan, some people may need very little money, right? It's not possible for him to go to the bank to borrow 500 pounds, right? But how to use this technology to make it more inclusive, because purely zero manual intervention, like 1 second to approve. I think on this point of view, it do have a value to make it inclusive, and also the way to do it open a lot of possibility to run more interactive business. For example, we also have another program we call Ant Forest. Every people using API-based services, he contributes his score regarding saving energy, right? And then Alibaba will plant a tree in the desert, So there's a lot of activity to really play at the ecosystem, a different way of working, yes.
Thank you. Because it's half of you by the time it gets down here, actually. So what about your perspective?
Yeah, I just think what Anna said is very important, that this relation of trust that people usually have with their banks should be leveraged by the banks, and they should really think about like using integrated product to use this trustful relationship with banks and leverage it with other services.
Fantastic. Right, we're at time. So as a summary, I think we heard that regulation, still new, still playing through, I think, the ecosystem, but you need it there for the guidelines, for the control, and also that incentive, actually, to be more open. I think some optimism around the innovation and what's going on in the market at the moment, and also that clear message to my question at the beginning around the API economy. I think we all know this, but it's not about the APIs. It's about the services, the products that sit around that, and how APIs enable that to happen. So have a good rest of your event. Thank you very much to the panel, and we'll speak to you all soon.